Chapters 4 and 5. Summary and Analysis. New Character. Ellen Dean, or Nellie, Lockwood's housekeeper, who has known all the characters for most of their lives. Summary. Bored and in low spirits from being alone in his room and recuperating from the frightful events at the Heights, Lockwood asks Nellie Dean to sit with him while he dines. Having developed a genuine curiosity about the residents of Wuthering Heights, he hopes she can offer some insights about them. As he had hoped, Nellie is an accurate historian. She provides him with several significant pieces of information. We learn that Heathcliff is quite wealthy, but tight-fisted. Rather than enjoy the comforts of the Grange, he rents it out and lives in the relative decay of the Heights. Furthermore, Nellie tells Lockwood that Cathy is the daughter of Catherine and Edgar Linton, and that Hareton is Hindley's son, and thus Cathy's first cousin. Nellie's most important revelation is that she knows all about Heathcliff's past, except for where he was born, who his parents were, and how he first acquired his money. We also learn that Heathcliff has somehow cheated Hareton of his inheritance. The novel continues at this point with Nellie as its narrator. Nellie tells of Heathcliff's introduction to Wuthering Heights many years ago when they were children. Mr. Earnshaw left for Liverpool after promising to bring Hindley and Catherine gifts upon his return. 3 days later he returned with a dirty, tattered orphan child who, he told his wife, had to be taken, quote, as a gift of God, unquote. The family is appalled. Despite Mr. Earnshaw's kind-hearted refusal to leave the orphan starving on the streets, his wife scolds him, and his children torment the boy for having crushed the gifts their father brought them. The children and Nellie refuse to allow the boy to sleep with them, and after spending his first night on the floor outside Mr. Earnshaw's room, he becomes a marginal part of the family. He is given the name Heathcliff after a son who had died in infancy. Quickly, Catherine and Heathcliff become friends, but Hindley develops a chronic hatred for him. Nellie admits she hated him as well, and that he was barely tolerated by Mrs. Earnshaw. Although Heathcliff is tormented and unloved by nearly everyone, Mrs. Earnshaw dotes on him, creating a source of intense jealousy in Hindley. Taking advantage of Earnshaw's affections, Heathcliff blackmails Hindley into giving him his horse by threatening to complain of Hindley's abusive behaviour. Hindley complies, but beats Heathcliff further. Nellie is initially impressed with how stoically Heathcliff endures abuse, giving her the false impression that Heathcliff does not have a vindictive nature. She is proven wrong. Mrs. Earnshaw dies. When Mr. Earnshaw's health fails, he becomes increasingly angered by his family's hatred for Heathcliff and becomes more protective of the boy. The kinder members of the household, in an effort to please the dying Mr. Earnshaw, begin to spoil Heathcliff. This only exacerbates Heathcliff's cunning manipulations and bad temper. Relations between Hindley and Heathcliff become unbearable, especially since Hindley is aware that his father prefers Heathcliff over him. At the local curate's suggestion, Hindley is sent away to college. As Earnshaw's health weakens, he allows Joseph, whom Nellie describes as, quote, the wearisomest self-righteous Pharisee that ever ransacked a Bible, unquote, considerable influence. Joseph's strict religious demeanour sways Earnshaw to reject Hindley completely for being a reprobate, and Catherine for being high-spirited and mischievous. Indeed, he tells her that he cannot love her when she is bad. Snuggling close to her father, she seeks his forgiveness, but it is too late. Mr. Earnshaw dies peacefully in his home, leaving Heathcliff and Catherine to cling to each other for comfort. Discussion and analysis. The reader begins to locate the source of Heathcliff's hostility in the rejection he suffered during his childhood. Even his lack of a surname served to place him in the lowest of social classes, a fact which later motivates him to become wealthy. Perhaps the roots of his evil nature are psychologically embedded in the cruelty he suffered as an orphan on the streets of Liverpool and at the hands of Hindley. However, he doesn't seem to benefit from the positive influences such as Earnshaw's devotion or Nellie's efforts in caring for him. The love he and Catherine share, which initially seems to be based in a sibling-like attachment, is potentially the only positive influence on his developing into a good person. Another interesting psychological study could be made from Hindley's situation. His father's insensitivity in rejecting him in favour of the orphaned Heathcliff is a cruel and permanent blow. Although we have little insight into Hindley's character before Heathcliff's arrival, Catherine's diary in chapter 3 informs us that he is now a domineering tyrant. Only Catherine, passionate but mischievous, seems unaltered by her family situation. The reader will discover in future chapters the thing that will alter her high-spirited nature. Chapters 6 and 7. Summary and Analysis. New characters. Frances Earnshaw, Hindley's wife, who he introduces to the family at his father's funeral. Mr. and Mrs. Linton, neighbours at Thrushcross Grange, the adjoining estate. Edgar Linton, their son, a handsome yet babyish mama's boy. Isabella Linton, their daughter, a spoiled and foolish girl. Summary. Hindley arrives home for his father's funeral with his wife Frances, a silly, pretty girl with no apparent family connections. Hindley is reminded of his loathing for Heathcliff and drives him from the family into the servants' quarters. Smitten with his wife, Hindley neglects Catherine's upbringing until Nellie fears she will grow up a savage. Under pressure from Joseph and the curate, Hindley allows Catherine and Heathcliff to be disciplined with church attendance and frequent punishments. They react to these measures by escaping to the moors where they can play. Under these conditions, Catherine and Heathcliff grow increasingly close and emotionally dependent upon each other. On one such escapade, they venture to the Linton home, Thrushcross Grange. Spying on the family through the window, Catherine is attacked on the ankle by their dog. When she is carried inside, young Edgar Linton recognises her as a Sunday school classmate, but Heathcliff is called a villain, deemed, quote, quite unfit for a decent house, unquote, due to his cursing and his swarthy appearance. He is thrown outdoors with the door bolted against him. Hiding by the window, he observes Catherine being fussed over and petted as her injured ankle is attended to. Obviously insulted, although not surprised, by the Lintons' treatment of him, Heathcliff tells Nellie that Catherine is far superior in her spirited nature to the insipid Linton children. Catherine remains with the Lintons for 5 weeks while she recuperates. During that time, the Lintons' well-mannered and conventional home life influences her behaviour, and she returns home a mirror image of Isabella Linton, much to Frances and Hindley's delight and Heathcliff's disgust. Greeting her upon arrival, Hindley takes pleasure in humiliating Heathcliff by telling him he, quote, may come and wish Miss Catherine welcome like the other servants, unquote. Catherine is concerned to see how filthy and neglected Heathcliff looks, but decides that this is because she is comparing him to the fair-skinned, blonde Linton children. Heathcliff, to the amusement of Hindley and Frances, rushes out of the room. Alone in the kitchen, Nellie begins to feel sorrow and guilt for Heathcliff's situation. She resolves to try and help the boy, but he ignores her. The following day, he agrees to accept her help, for he wants her to make him decent. He is, quote, going to be good, unquote. Nellie promises to groom him so that he will look handsome compared to Edgar Linton, and tries to encourage him by pointing out that Edgar is older, but Heathcliff is stronger. This does little to comfort Heathcliff, since he knows he can never be fair-skinned or rich like Edgar. Nellie advises him that, quote, a good heart will help him to a bonny face, unquote, and cheers him into believing himself a mysteriously handsome dark prince. The arrival of the Linton children for a visit quickly puts an end to Heathcliff's resolve to feel good by behaving well. Goaded by Hindley's refusal to let him partake of the refreshments, he immediately strikes out at Edgar Linton. Rather than accuse him, Catherine turns on Edgar, blaming him for speaking to Heathcliff. Hindley banishes Heathcliff, and the visit proceeds without further incident. When Nelly later brings Heathcliff down to the kitchen, he tells her he is planning his revenge on Hindley, regardless of how long it takes. Nelly advises him to leave vengeance to God and learn to forgive, but Heathcliff can only bear his pain by dreaming of revenge. Nelly interrupts her narration here to apologize to Lockwood for talking so long. Assuring her he is quite enthralled with her story, he begs her to continue and leave nothing out. Discussion and analysis. Chapter 6 defines the polar worlds represented by Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. The Grange and its inhabitants, the Lintons, symbolize conventional Victorian society, that is, everything that is good and rational in human relations. The Heights, on the other hand, like the Earnshaws themselves, embodies everything that is evil and dysfunctional in humanity. Significantly, within moments of her arrival at the Grange, the effects of civilized behaviour can be seen in Catherine. Heathcliff, as a reject from this bastion of conventional propriety, appears to be doomed to remain on the fringes of society, an untouchable outcast. Yet it is this rejection from society, combined with the reader's revulsion toward Hindley for his treatment of Heathcliff, that causes us to feel some sympathy for him. Even though we are immediately repelled by Heathcliff in the first chapters, in chapter 7 we are moved to pity the ill-treated boy, particularly when he begs Nelly to help him be decent and good. Further, chapters 6 and 7 set up the theme of revenge which dominates the entire novel. The earlier vision of Hareton, Hindley's son, as a servile illiterate deprived of his inheritance now appears to mirror Hindley's treatment of Heathcliff. Heathcliff's behaviour in the first chapters, seemingly inexplicable, can now be viewed as a part of the elaborate scheme for revenge he plotted in chapter 7. Or, Nelly tells Lockwood that Cathy is the daughter of Catherine and Edgar Linton, and that Hareton is Hindley's son, and thus Cathy's first cousin. Nelly's most important revelation is that she knows all about Heathcliff's past, except for where he was born, who his parents were, and how he first acquired his money. We also learn that Heathcliff has somehow cheated Hareton of his inheritance. The novel quote. The family is appalled. Despite Mr. Earnshaw's kind-hearted refusal to leave the orphan starving on the streets, his wife scolds him, and his children torment the boy for having crushed the gifts their father brought them. The children and Nelly refuse to allow the boy to sleep with them, and after spending his first night on the floor outside Mr. Earnshaw's room, he becomes a marginal part of the family. Having developed a genuine curiosity about the residents of Wuthering Heights, he hopes she can offer some insights about them. As he had hoped, Nelly is an accurate historian. She provides him with several significant pieces of information. We learn that Heathcliff is quite wealthy, but tight-fisted. Rather than enjoy the comforts of the Grange, he rents it out and lives in the relative decay of the Heights. Furthermore, chapters 4 and 5, Summary and Analysis. New character, Ellen Dean, or Nelly, Lockwood's housekeeper, who has known all the characters for most of their lives. Summary. Bored and in low spirits from being alone in his room and recuperating from the frightful events at the Heights, Lockwood asks Nelly Dean to sit with him while he dines. Continues at this point with Nelly as its narrator. Nelly tells of Heathcliff's introduction to Wuthering Heights many years ago when they were children. Mr. Earnshaw left for Liverpool after promising to bring Hindley and Catherine gifts upon his return. 3 days later he returned with a dirty, tattered orphan child who, he told his wife, had to be taken, quote, as a gift of God, unquote.